All right, welcome everybody to the comic panel. I'm Cody.
I'm Talon.
And I'm Jacob.
And today we are covering Rorschach, written by Tom King, art by George Fornes, colors by Dave Stewart, lettered by Clayton Cowles. And so to get into it, this is published by DC Comics, and it is a spin-off sequel to Watchmen, the massively popular, influential 1985 graphic novel written by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. You will see in the credits for this book, though, it does say that Watchmen is just co-created by Dave Gibbons. Alan Moore chose not to be credited for this, as with all of his Watchmen things, as well as other of his works from big two companies. It's the same thing that's happened with Miracle Man recently.
With Alan Moore?
Mm-hmm. With Alan Moore specifically, yeah. So yeah. But I felt like he should be at least slightly credited for Watchmen.
Look at that, going against his own wishes.
I know.
It is technically, but I mean, he did make it.
Yeah.
Like, he created the...
Yes.
Even if he doesn't want to be connected to it anymore, he still, did it.
Is a fact.
Yeah. Factually. It's true. You can't change the Wikipedia page.
Well, I mean...
You can, though. That's kind of the point.
Well, you can, but, somebody else is going to change it back.
You can change it to say, Alan Moore did not create this comic book.
Yeah. Well, no. I mean, it's not saying that he didn't either. It's just saying that it's only co-created by Dave Gibbons. There is some other creator. You can find that information out. But yeah, so getting into this book, I kind of wanted to ask you guys, what is your history with the Watchmen universe?
So, read Watchmen. I've read it a couple times. The first time I think I was in, middle school, so I didn't, get it.
Mm-hmm.
But since then, read it, and it's interesting. The Alan Moore's thoughts on, the legacy of Watchmen are also kind of interesting, even if I don't agree with all of them. And then also read The Button, which was a short-lived tie-in between, Watchmen and specifically Dr. Manhattan and the main DC universe.
Yeah.
All right. Did you ever read any Doomsday Clock?
A few. I think I got about halfway through.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't think I read all of it, but I might have.
Okay. What about you, Talon?
I don't think I ever read the comic, or at least all the way. And I have vague recollection that I started it. Watched the Zack Snyder movie of it.
I haven't seen the movie all the way through, I guess.
Oh, really?
I've seen, the beginning a couple times.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Probably the best part of that movie is the beginning.
Yeah.
I believe we read The Button for the show.
Mm-hmm.
And then we read one issue of Doomsday Clock. And I think... Oh, and then I watched a gangster recaps Watchmen video.
Ah.
So.
Well, it sounds like you're all caught up then. Don't even bother reading it.
Yeah. I'd say I'm pretty much in the same boat as Jake. I've I feel like I've read half of Doomsday Clock. I've read the original series a couple of times. I've watched the movie from Zack Snyder a couple of times. I think I've only seen the first episode of the HBO Max
Same
series.
I forgot about that.
I'm trying to think of what else. Never read any of the before Watchmen tie-ins.
Oh, did not know those were a thing?
I'm pretty sure those were drawn by Darwin Cook. I don't remember who wrote them.
Also, apparently there was a tabletop game for the Watchmen that I believe Moore and Gibbons were involved with.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I read that in an article at one point.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure how that would work at all, but
Nope. It is no longer continued though. So.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So yeah, I was just curious, basically. So this takes place, in that, in Watchmen's universe, and it starts off with, basically the, title character, Rorschach. He is, running and gets shot, multiple times. And is at a campaign event for a presidential candidate. And so basically, as you go through the 12 issues of the story, you follow this. I think the point is he's a private detective, right? Not FBI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he is basically trying to understand the story of these people. One was dressed as Rorschach, another had kind of a cowgirl type outfit, and she went by the Kid. And trying to figure out, their stories, their backgrounds. And then as he gets deeper and deeper, it becomes filled with more and more like political intrigue. But yeah, basically the person in the Rorschach costume, of course, was not actually the original Rorschach, as people who have read Watchmen know. Rorschach gets obliterated by Dr. Manhattan at the end of that.
But that's not like a commonly known event.
Right. Yeah. In universe, that is not known. But readers would know. But the interesting thing is that the man who, in the autopsy, they take his fingerprints and they're able to identify that his fingerprints are the original fingerprints of Rorschach. I'm blanking on his first name. It's
Walter.
Walter Kovacs.
Walter Kovacs.
Oh, Kovac?
Kovacs. Yeah.
Kovac. Okay, I was just putting an R in his last name. Kovacs. But it turns out that he's not Walter Kovacs. He is actually famous comic book artist Will Myerson. And basically he is essentially a stand-in for an alternate universe Steve Ditko.
Really?
Yeah, which is the creator. Steve Ditko created The Question. The Question was what Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons modeled Rorschach off of.
Okay, I was wondering why in I guess it's not a sequel book, but like the book after the pirate one he makes is something called The Citizen and the Unthinker.
Mm-hmm.
Citizen looks like The Question.
Yeah.
Huh.
With the face or lack thereof.
Right. Yeah.
Interesting that the citizen is the one with the blank face, though.
Right. And The Question also has a blank face.
My first thought would be like the unthinker would be the question, but
No. Yeah. Yeah, we'll get into that later, but yeah, that's the important part. But he is most well known for his creation of Pontius Pirate. Is that how you?
Yes.
Pontius? I meant to look up what Pontius meant, but I don't know.
Is that like a play on Pontius Pilate?
I think so.
Oh, maybe. I'd never heard of Pontius Pilate before.
He's the guy that sentenced Jesus.
Oh. So he did not fly airplanes.
No. Nope.
No, it's a weird like Roman spelling of pilot. It's not not like an aviator pilot.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, and but Pontius Pirate is a stand-in for Spider-Man in this Steve Ditko.
Yes.
Stand-in kind of thing. And also in the Watchmen universe, it is established that pirates are what became popular in American comics because superheroes existed in their universe. So
interesting.
Something more fantastical took root for them.
Gotcha.
It's like
I would have thought
presumably pirates also having existed.
Yeah.
Like historically.
Yeah, but I'm sure that that made it more like we've technically had, vigilante justice in this universe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we probably had a couple comedians around.
Yeah, I would have thought more like also it's, you have heroes who are like super good guys and then it's like a little strand of like, I want to be rebellious. So that's why.
Well, it does seem like Pontius Pirate does seem to be like comically good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Considering like, if I'm recalling correctly, he was like born in like a pirate society and chose to be good.
I don't know.
Instead of being the pirate all the time, I guess.
Yeah, I think I also picked that up, but it was a little bit confusing.
I think that makes sense though.
Yeah. But yeah, that's basically kind of it. So do we get a name for the private eye?
No.
No. Okay.
As far as
I kept calling him Columbo in my head because he
looks like Columbo. Yeah.
Does look a little bit like Columbo. Oh,
and part of that is like the jacket, but I guess that's also like a Rorschach jacket.
No, his face and like hair looks like Columbo.
Does look a little bit like Columbo. I see it. The girl that was with Will Myerson, who went by the Kid, her name was Laura Cummings, and she was basically trained by her father, who believed that at the end of Watchmen, Adrian Vedit, the smartest man in the world, I forget what his superhero name is, something in reference to Egyptian mythology stuff. He basically, in order to get the world off of the brink of nuclear disaster from bombing each other, he created fake aliens and teleported them into a building in New York City and basically staged a fake alien invasion in order to unite the world against this common threat. But now, so we have people who really believe that there are squid space aliens who are on their way to, take over the Earth. And so Laura's dad basically believes that they have psychic powers and that they can infiltrate your mind, and so it's up to them to set things right on Earth and kill the people who have had their mind infected by squids. And Laura's dad has already killed Laura's mom.
Because he thought she was infected with the squids, or at least mind controlled.
Yeah. And after training Laura in all of the ways of modern warfare that he could do, basically he had her kill him because he felt that the squids had gotten into his mind.
Once he had read Pontius Pilate.
Yeah.
Or Pontius Pirate, sorry.
Yeah.
No, sorry. It was The Citizen and the Unthinker. That's what he read.
Oh, okay. That makes more sense.
Yep.
Yeah. And yeah, so that kind of sets her on her goal. She does get one other person that she met in a circus act to basically be Rorschach.
Muscles the Man Mountain.
Yeah. And she basically, kind of, he falls in love with her, and so that's kind of why but he also believes, he, to a point,
he was convinced.
He was convinced, that he was Rorschach reincarnated, because basically that's what she believes, is that the reason that all of the heroes disappeared after the attack of 85 was that Dr. Manhattan sent all of their consciousnesses into the future, into other people. And that's
it was like they're trying to make sense of what they are seeing,
right?
And so it's like he said, the way that he says it is like, it makes sense if you think about it.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's more or less it. I mean, we get more of the relationship that Laura and Will develop together. We also find out that real comic book creator Frank Miller is involved in all of this.
Yeah, it was weird.
Was that like oh wait, no, you go.
I thought it was weird because there's a subplot, or there's a part of the steps is this tape recording that occurred between Will Myerson, Frank Miller, and a couple other people. Everybody but Frank Miller on the tape ends up being dead, and he's the last one to go to. When I first saw it was Frank Miller, I was like, okay, that's like a nod to other comic creators who would have been active at the time. Okay, sure. But then they go to their house and it's just a guy who looks like Frank Miller now, and I know that because I looked up there was too much focus on the panel of what Frank Miller looked like.
Yeah.
So I had to Google it, and it just looks like Frank Miller.
Yeah.
Really?
No, it is.
I did not know that.
Frank Miller. Yeah. And it's, I mean,
I think I gave this book a little bit more credit. I was like, no, it's just random name.
Okay, so wait, what part of it did you get when then they were talking about The Dark Fife Returns, which is just a play on The Dark Knight Returns?
Oh, wow. No, that went over my head. I did not know that.
Oh, come on. They talked about it being dark and gritty and ruining superhero or pirate comics for a while.
Hey, that went over my head. That's all I can say.
Okay. Yeah.
I was too engrossed in the world.
Yeah. Then there's, other people that helped him. This is Will Myerson, yeah, and Laura. And basically, there's a lawyer, a psychiatrist, and handyman.
Yeah.
And they basically all are like, yeah, we're innocent. We didn't know what was going on. But then when like they're pressed far enough, they're basically like, now you see, it's like, oh, that's really weird.
Well, it's interesting because they were all like, yeah, it was a little weird, but like, I judged it to be fine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Also, as the investigation goes on, the private investigator basically starts to see and talk to Laura, the kid, and Will Myerson as Rorschach. Although Laura is there more often than Rorschach. Yeah, and he basically kind of uncovers that all of this big mystery, like he gets to the very end of it, that it turns out that this was all a plot funded and kind of, controlled by President Redford, which is the famous actor Robert Redford.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I did see that.
Yeah. So in this universe, Robert Redford is the president, and he has basically staged this assassination, which I guess I didn't say at the very beginning, was that Rorschach and Laura Cummings were there to assassinate
presidential candidate.
The presidential candidate, which
Gavin Turley.
Gavin Turley, who was the Republican competitor to Robert Redford. And so basically it was this complicated conspiracy where it was actually, or that's right. It was Robert Redford basically, paid people to make it easier for Will Myerson and Laura Cummings to try and assassinate Turley. But then you come to find out that it was actually Turley's campaign who's trying to basically frame Robert Redford's campaign and make it look like, he was super corrupt, and so this was the only way that he was going to win, and that was the only way that they were going to be able to get a majority of votes, because Robert Redford had the majority with basically having broad support in the state of Vietnam, which is a state in this universe.
Part of the United States.
Yeah, part of the United States. So basically our private eye figures all of this out. And so he goes to the office of Turley to basically present all of the evidence with his campaign manager who hired him, and he basically kind of plays along with the charade for a little while, and then when it's time to listen to the confession tape that somebody left, which it turns out was fake, but he kills both Turley and the campaign manager, and he becomes Rorschach basically, and he goes to the movies to watch the new Pontius pirate movie. And that's where it ends.
Yep. There's a huge mystery throughout this entire book.
Yeah.
And so you're following along with the detective trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah. So, what do you guys think? What do you like in this?
I liked the story overall, even though I think I have a slightly different interpretation of the ending events. Where I think I don't know where the exact point is, but I don't think that what the detective ultimately decides is happening is like real. I think it's I don't know what a good reference for it is, but I think because he gets kind of Rorschach-y towards the end.
Right.
So like he's convincing himself that it's real, but I don't think it's like accurate to what is actually happening around him.
Gotcha. I kind of had that thought where, so the point where it was for me was like, when he was like having that conversation with Laura at the end, like, or the issue right before.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like, it like she says it in a way of like, it makes sense if you think about it. And so it's like, not sure how this, like, what's really happening there.
Yeah, definitely an unreliable narrator, which maybe I should have stressed a little bit more earlier, that he's talking to people that are not there.
That's probably what makes him a pretty good private eye. It allows him to make connections that like most people wouldn't see, but maybe it's not real.
Yeah. I don't know. It is kind of like, because I mean, ultimately, it does feel, to me at least, like the story is trying to put you on the side of the private eye because there are loose threads that haven't been connected. And so it's like, okay, well, what about the fingerprints? What about, I'm trying to think of the other thing. There was like a couple of other, little bits that just like, yeah, why?
Now, is that the fingerprints matching Rorschach, or the fingerprints on the bottle of the not bodyguard for oh god, the connections that it makes me feel like it happened way earlier.
Right. No.
But like, so
wait, sorry, what?
Well, go ahead, Jake.
So there's a bottle in this guy's safe, and this guy is a part of the Turley campaign.
Redford campaign?
Oh, yeah, because that's the connection between, and we have to think Redford did it.
Yeah.
And he, in a safe under his bed, kept a beer bottle that had the guy who assigned the detective's fingerprints on it, I think.
Yeah.
It was his name was Alan.
Yeah.
He was a campaign official that hired the detective. And so that guy's fingerprints was on the bottle. And so then one night, the detective and Alan were having a drink. Alan leaves, and the detective looks at the bottle, and he's like, I wonder if I can find a match there. Like, he obviously doesn't say that, but it's implied. And so he takes a look at it, and he's like, oh, wow, they're a match.
Yeah. And to be clear, I was actually talking about Walter Korvik's Prince, yeah.
So, like,
yeah.
So, like, in the beginning, it's stated, hey, there's this collector dude in LA that I helped him with a case a while back. And this is the detective saying that. So he sent me Rorschach's prints. Turns out they're a match. And so I believe that's how they find out that, oh, this is it looks like Rorschach is the,
Right. It looks like he's back at first.
Yeah.
But then more autopsy finds out it's Will Myerson, and then
it's not even more autopsy. They gave him the tape of all those people in that recording.
Oh.
And they said one of the guys, Will Myerson, is the same age as this guy, and he disappeared around 4 weeks ago.
Mm.
And then they were like, we think this is the guy.
Right.
And we also have evidence that Laura was in the same town as Myerson when he disappeared.
Right.
So I feel like that's kind of flimsy, honestly, but...
Well, I don't know.
I mean, it was right, though.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it is one of those things where technically, because of the amount of conspiracy and the unreliability of the narrator, technically everything in the story is flimsy. But at the same time, if we are to believe that there is reliability in the events placed in Watchmen, then it's like, okay, well, we know that was not actually Rorschach, Walter Kovacs. I keep putting that
Kovacs.
Kovacs. There we go.
Keep throwing that R in there. It's not in his name.
It's because I read it wrong way back when I first read Watchmen, and that it's just been in my head that way forever.
But yeah, talking about stuff we like, I like the story overall. I like that there is that kind of sense of whether or not this stuff is really happening or happening as we are seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's a good story, even though it does get a little. It's long. I think there are some parts that overstates welcome, but that's more for stuff I don't like.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. I do feel like Tom King has a really good style for writing people's voices, like, making character voices.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like, everybody, because like there's a lot of characters, as you go through the investigation. You've got the private eye, you've got, the presidential candidate, you've got the campaign manager, you've got the security guy for the office of the presidential candidate, you've got Frank Miller, you've got Will Myerson and Laura and the Muscle Mountain Man and just all these characters, as he goes through his investigation. And yeah, it was just interesting, or not interesting. It was just I really felt like each person had their own distinct voice and way of talking. So yeah, I thought that was pretty good.
I enjoyed the story like immensely because I was able to become engrossed in the story. Like I was trying to figure out this mystery with the detective.
Nice.
And so like I kept detailed notes of who showed up, names that were said, people that showed up on the panel, and kept detailed notes of like, okay, all right, we have this information presented to us that leaves us with these kind of questions. Like, all right, what does this mean? How does this entail? Yeah, and then as I'm going through the story, remembering the questions that I had and being like, okay, does this story answer these questions? Boom, bada bing. Okay, there we go. And then when it got to the part where it was like, here's how the mystery all unfolds, I was like, okay, I need to make sure I understand what's being said because it's kind of convoluted. But so like I was really able to be engrossed and I enjoyed that.
So all that detail, all that paid attention, it just Frank Miller just slipped past you like that.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I mean, did you figure it out?
Not before they told us no. The only thing I probably was able to figure out was just that Alan was not who he said he was. Only because the detective lied to Alan right after he met the president or the presidential candidate the first time and was like, because Alan asked him if Turley brought up Redford. And the detective was like, no, which was a lie. And so it made me think, does the detective not trust Alan? And I was like, all right, that's enough for me. And then also Alan, when the detective was relaying the information, the initial information of like, oh, it's involved with Redford, Oates, or Jonathan Oates, and his assistant, like all that. When it was first laid out, Alan was listening to it, and he was like, whoa, the Redford campaign is involved, like, with all this. And I was reading it, I was like, no, you are twisting what he's saying right now. And I was like, that's sus, bro. Like, you're really angling for Redford to be involved. And so that kind of set me off. I was like, there's something not right with this guy. But, yeah.
Also, here's a question for both of you, because I just thought of it. Do you think that Alan, the campaign manager, is in some way a reference to Alan Moore?
He didn't look enough like a wizard.
Well, yeah, you couldn't be that on the nose like Frank Miller, because they just used Frank Miller's name and likeness and everything about him. But I feel like, like Alan Moore's lawyers...
Is that not the bar now? if we've gone that far?
No, because like obviously it was with Frank Miller's permission, Alan Moore is like, I don't want anything to do with this. So you gotta like sneak him in there a little bit.
I mean, it does make sense
subtextually
that his last name was not mentioned, and we didn't even get the fact that his name was Alan till page 105. So
is it spelled the same?
There other? Oh yeah, there are other ways to spell
Alan. Yeah, ALAN.
I believe it is spelled the same.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe then.
It makes sense if you think about it.
Yeah.
Well, not really.
Well, what do you mean, Jake? Think about it.
Like, what does Alan, the campaign manager, have to do with Alan Moore, the creator of Watchmen?
To be fair, I don't actually think that Alan is a stand-in for Alan Moore. I just don't know.
You're just going along the ride for my buffoonery. No, I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I only just now thought of the possibility that could be a connection. And so, like, the most, like, just general, kind of easiest to accept thing is it's just a reference. There's no, like, subtext with meaning attached to it. It's just, this is a character, and I wanted to credit Alan Moore in some way without actually crediting him because he doesn't want to be credited. But, this is just my little reference. There's a character named Alan. But then, there's also he does at the end kill Alan, so in some ways it could be like, kind of it's time to release your hold on, these characters in this universe. Like, I mean, not that he ever really had control, but like, just kind of being like, I am free to, write these on behalf of DC Comics. I don't know. I'd have to think about it some more.
Fair. And I don't know how that really makes sense with what Tom King, like, after reading a couple of his interviews about this, like, I don't know if that makes sense with what he was trying to go for, which was like making a statement of the culture at the time, or the political sphere.
Gotcha.
Which, I mean, it might fit. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think it's probably a lot more likely that is, if anything, just a nod.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's a question. So Frank Miller, if we're saying that this is actually...
That is actually Frank Miller.
Why? Why do that?
So that is because The Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen often get co-credit for bringing in what is known as the Dark Age of comics. basically from, they were both published in 1985, I believe. Maybe one of them was 1986. And yeah, pretty much it created an onslaught of superhero comics that, basically missed the point of Watchmen. And, we're all like, oh yes, everybody just likes it when their superheroes kill people. And there's like lots of like, maybe political intrigue and stuff, and not, that, or making stories where it's like, this is what superheroes are like in real life, and pretty much just making it superheroes are awful people because they have power and stuff like that.
Jupiter's Legacy.
Yeah, Jupiter's Legacy. I mean, the boys, it is just, and really both of those creators, I believe, have works that are similar from closer to this period, yeah.
Gotcha.
And among others, not just those ones. Those are just ones that come to mind immediately. So yeah, that is why I think Frank Miller is partially evolved. I even have a theory for why Otto Binder was involved. I think that is actually a Miracle Man reference, because Otto Binder is the creator of Captain Marvel, the Captain Marvel of Fawcett Comics, who eventually got purchased by DC and became Shazam.
Really?
Yeah.
Because they make a reference to that in this comic, of Otto Binder being involved with Captain Marvel.
Right, exactly. And so the story with Miracle Man is that when DC basically did the lawsuit saying that Captain Marvel was too similar to Superman, Fawcett Comics lost the rights to keep making it, but they were selling it overseas, and a different company was distributing it. So once they were like, well, you can't do that, basically the next issue, they just created Miracle Man, where it was basically just a reskinned Captain Marvel with a different power word. Instead of saying Shazam, he says, what is it? It's atomic backwards. Komoda.
Komoda. That's funny.
And so yeah, they basically just continued the series, but with Miracle Man and in the UK. And then Alan Moore, after, the series basically stopped being published, just because there was kind of a rut in superhero sales overseas. Alan Moore takes over the series, and he basically, it's kind of the opposite of Watchmen in a way. It's where a Superman basically creates utopia for the world using his powers. And yeah, so that's basically why I feel like Otto Binder was referenced in this at all.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is interesting. I think it's the little references in here are kind of fun. Yeah, and I also felt like there was a reference to the TV show, which was interesting.
Yeah.
At one point they talk about cops wearing masks
even after Oklahoma.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, there's a lot of brand synergy here, which I didn't expect.
Which I have some question about, I guess. Not really question, just an interesting thought. Because in an interview that Tom King did, he was saying that he didn't directly reference the TV show, but he made sure that nothing would contradict continuity-wise. And so, to me, I mean, this seems like a more Maybe his definition of direct reference is different than mine, but
Right. Yeah, it might have, a direct reference for him might have been like including a character or including events, more directly. Yeah. That's kind of what I assume.
I actually didn't think about that till just now.
Yeah. Yeah, what's interesting to me is that so for one thing, it's a very, I guess what I can say is that this takes place before Doomsday Clock, and I assume that those things are supposed to be connected, not in separate Watchmen universes. But yeah, it's interesting to me that the kind of final, the epilogue, if you will, of Watchmen is that Rorschach's journal detailing, the events of Watchmen from, his perspective, of course, is sent into a newspaper. And basically, because they're in an era of, peace and prosperity, the newspaper publisher basically tells the intern that he can publish whatever he wants, And so it looks like Rorschach's journal will be published and the world will find out, that everything was a lie. But that hasn't happened. This story takes place in 2020. So yeah, and nobody knows, what happened in Watchmen, basically, the general public. So it's kind of interesting that they were like, yeah, that's, what you thought was going to happen at the end of Watchmen. It didn't happen. Don't care about that kid. I think he gets a name. I don't remember what his name is. It's kind of freckly and has a smiley face shirt that drips ketchup on, so it looks like the blood drop from the comedian's badge.
I respect the restraint that we didn't get that in this comic.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Because I saw the big comedian logo in the presidential candidate's office, and I'm like, oh man, I know exactly what's going to happen. Except it didn't happen.
They did.
So hey, you know what? Good job.
Yeah, they did put a big drop of blood on his campaign badge at the end.
That's technically different, sort of.
Technically different, but still a reference. And I was like,
Yeah.
Gave a Rorschach
Yeah, apparently, Doomsday Clock, from another article I read, discussed, when Adrian Veidt, the guy from Watchmen who orchestrated the whole plot with the alien invasion and all that.
Yeah.
Ozymandias.
Ozymandias.
Yes,
his name.
That's it. Yep. Apparently, the Doomsday Clock establishes that plan, or the piece, fell apart back in, it was 80 or 92, something a year that ended in 2. But
okay, yeah.
But in the last century. But the first year that came to mind was 82, but that doesn't make any sense. So
yeah, it would probably be 92.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, interesting.
But the way that it was phrased was because of the Rorschach journals being published. But then I guess it's possible that there are people who are despite what Rorschach said.
Yeah, it is true. He sent it into his favorite newspaper, which was technically just a tabloid that pretty much published kind of right-wing theories.
And Rorschach was also, if I recall correctly, mostly a crazy person.
Yeah,
probably.
For lack of a better term, yeah, he was.
He was a Randian.
Well,
that's not why he was crazy.
Yeah,
I wasn't implying that.
Yes, you are correct, but that's not why.
Yeah,
I read that from an article too, so that's.
Anyway, though, yeah, he was unstable, and yeah, so I could see, but it's weird that this book called Rorschach doesn't even mention Rorschach's journal at all. It didn't say anything about that in the interviews that you read?
Not about that specifically, but about like the broader idea of this comic, which kind of encompasses that. And that's honestly part of what I dislike, and so I can talk more about that when we get there.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, because based on what you said about Doomsday Clock and stuff like that, I guess I'm more inclined to believe that this is like its own separate thing.
I think so.
Okay. Interesting. That's kind of good to know. And I think I like that a little bit more. I didn't finish Doomsday Clock, like I said, but I kind of felt like it was not very good.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and this feels at least a little bit more in line with what would be appropriate for a sequel series. I think that there is actually like quotes of Alan Moore speaking where he was all like basically saying that it would be quite ridiculous if Rorschach ever went into the DC universe and vice versa. And like that was definitely not what he wanted.
I gotcha.
So yeah, like I mean, granted, I'm sure he also doesn't like that this is here, but at the same time, I feel like it's at least somewhat more acceptable, where it's like, yeah, this is just, it's a self-contained plot in the universe of Watchmen.
Gotcha. I will say, like, something I like about this comic that I don't believe was Tom King's intention, but there's several instances with, characters talking about squids, and, there's like the whole thing with Laura and her father, like them being afraid of the squids kind of thing. And it made me think of, it made me think of the original Watchmen comics, but I don't know if this is actually in Watchmen or if this is somebody who's like, I've read like the review of Watchmen saying this, but I heard it said it was like the end of Watchmen begs the question: is it better to be in war or to have peace, even though it's based on a lie? And so, to me, there were moments where you see like the effect of what happened in, I'm a little confused when it happened, but it's either 85, 87, or 86, whatever. Like people talking about the effect of what happened during that time. And I think it would have been really cool to be like, explore that like idea of, well, this is what happens when you try to have peace based on a lie.
Right.
And so I liked that I got a little bit of that, even though I don't believe that was Tom King's intention. And so.
Yeah. I mean, I could see that a little bit, like, as an undercurrent. It's not what's being focused on, but it is like there are consequences, especially like, not that I'm arguing that Ozymandias's plan was right, and all of that, but like, at least like do some upkeep with your lie. It's like, why aren't the squids here? Like, like how, like, did he really think there was just like this one attack and then everything will be okay? Like, I mean, I guess if the only thing is to stop nuclear disaster, then it's like, okay, we don't have to have like full peace. We just need to like, make it so we're not about to kill the entire Earth. I guess it's successful so far. It's been 40 years roughly, 35 years. Yeah. But it does have consequences, for like everyday people, and of course this is a Rorschach story, not an Ozymandias story, so we don't get to know where he is, what his deal is, because I think he was kind of, after he made the choice, a little bit disillusioned with his choice after speaking to Dr. Manhattan about it, if I remember correctly. But that is an interesting point, though, that there is undercurrents of kind of that theme, even if they're not directly tackled. Trying to think of other things, because there were other things that I liked. I did find it mostly pretty engaging. I thought that a lot of it was really interesting. There was a lot that I'll talk about in the art too that I thought was pretty good. So I just wanted to mention that briefly here, that will be gone over later. I feel like this might be one of those ones that I will remember a lot more of the things that I like once I'm going over the things that I didn't like.
I see, gotcha.
But overall, I think, it does a pretty good job at what I would say, as far as as harrowing as writing a comic book can be, the harrowing job of writing a Watchmen spin-off sequel. It does a pretty good job, I think. It takes a lot of the things that people like about Watchmen, the mystery element. It has, plots by powerful people. It has, political factors. It and it's a little bit more focused on, being a Rorschach series, the things that people liked about Rorschach in Watchmen as opposed to Watchmen on its own. So I think that's pretty much the things that I liked. Did you guys have anything else to add?
I mean, probably implied by what I was saying, but the mystery element was, I love that. So.
Nice. Yeah, the mystery was good. It was well executed, even though by merit of it being a Rorschach story, you expect there to be a twist, for lack of a better word, where something gets uncovered, but it really only uncovers the real scope of the thing that actually happened, if that is what happened.
Okay. I feel like as I was reading it, I didn't have that as much. Maybe if I had taken more time to read it slower and think about it, I could see having that, but I was I guess kind of a mixture of just quickly reading and also, being fairly engrossed in the story too, whereas just I was accepting things as they were being presented. So I didn't have a lot of preconceived notions about where I was going, just kind of, I guess, enjoying the journey, as it were. So to go on to things that we didn't like, I feel like So, I mean, first, I guess one of the one of the things that's easiest to think about is, man, why did they put Frank Miller in there? Like, I mean, I answered that question, but like, also, that's not a good answer. Like,
And like, if they just used the name Frank Miller, but like continued as like the rest of the stuff was the same with like the Dark Five Returns, I'd be like, okay, yeah, sure,
yeah,
that's. I may disagree with the inclusion, but I think that's a better way to do it. But it also just looks like Frank Miller.
yeah. Well, yeah, no, I'm fine with a verbal reference, you know, just like Otto Binder, for instance. But to see him and have him be a major character in the plot is weird. It's weird because everybody.
That's because he also gets brainwashed or what have you into also thinking he's Rorschach.
Yeah. So, like, I thought you guys were going to say that, because to me, it seems very, like, malicious to include him in that. And so I thought you guys were going to say, like, oh, there's some bad blood between them, which, I mean, obviously, I don't know. And I don't think that's necessarily true.
No, I don't think so, and I think that this was definitely more of a not a, like, you know, I think that Frank Miller was, you know, had an active role, like, not in the story's development. Obviously he wasn't credited, but I think that he, like, you know, Tom King probably was like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, you know, do you, like, you know, basically it is to his credit, not to his detriment, you know.
Gotcha.
How weird would it be if he just didn't ask for permission, though? Like, the book comes out, and then Frank Miller has to come out with the statement like, I didn't know Tom King was going to put me in the book, much less make me an accomplice to a assassination.
Yeah. Yeah, it's...
Assassination attempt, I suppose.
Which, yeah, so that gets into the other thing, which, like, why do comic book writers feel the need to make Watchmen about the comic book industry? Because that's what Doomsday Clock is about, and that's kind of, I did appreciate, kind of, as Talon said, that, like, this one is a little bit more about, like, political climate in, you know, the year that it came out, more, or the year that it was being written, you know, more than being about the comic industry, but it's still there. And having Will Myerson, the Steve Ditko insert, is just, it's weird, really. Like, I was interested in it. I knew that it was, like, there was a Steve Ditko insert. Somebody had told me, and so I was like, okay, I'm willing to, you know, hear about this. But the most important difference is that Tom King flips him. As you said, Rorschach was Randian, and originally, and the question was somewhat that way, but also, you know, it was like a Charleston Comics superhero, so he just, you know, couldn't be that heavily political. But eventually Steve Ditko did create his own character who is essentially the Question, called Mr. A. And Mr. A was very, very Randian, and yeah, it's a weird book to read. You can look it up online. It's, yeah, not very interesting or fun. It's just
so it's Randian.
Yeah. Yes.
But I mean, to address you a little bit, like, there is that part of Watchmen where Adrian Veidt has, like, kidnapped all those comic writers and sent them to an island to help produce the story, I think. Am I recalling correctly?
Yeah, the story and design the alien, too.
So, like, there's probably something there about like creatives and their creations being co-opted by people in power to like influence people. There's probably something there.
That's true. And also like just the, the original inclusion of the pirates and the freighters of the black.
It's something.
Something like that. Or no, I think it's just the black freighter, maybe. Probably. Of course.
It's been a couple of years since I read Watchmen. I don't remember.
Yeah, but the pirate story that is interspersed in Watchmen, and it parallels the story a little bit, in some ways, which that also bugs me that they're all like, yes, every single important superhero comic has a pirate parallel in this, but like the one that was in Watchmen was not an obvious parallel unless it was supposed to parallel Watchmen itself, but also it didn't feel like that. It was its own thing that just had themes that related to the themes of Watchmen. So yeah, it was just...
So wait, let me see if I understand. There is a pirate analog, I guess, in Watchmen.
Yes. And I should be clear, it is not just what happens in Watchmen happens in this pirate book. It just has themes that are related to the events that are going on, but it is a completely different story. It is about a pirate that gets, his ship gets destroyed, and he's on basically a makeshift raft out of the pieces of his ship, and he basically goes crazy while trying to survive.
And this pirate book is not that one. This one in Rorschach.
Yeah. It is not Pontius Pirate or the Dark Fife.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. So, and it doesn't have, any other obvious superhero parallel. It is just its own thing that people are reading in that universe, mostly kids. Yeah, so it was kind of annoying in a way that it was like, okay, now everything has a parallel, and yeah, they did, they also, for some reason, flipped, Steve Ditko's politics, and
there's a article by Sci-Fi that talks about this specifically with King's Rorschach, and he says that instead of it being from an Ayn Rand background, I transitioned it just to sort of respond, and I made the contemporary Rorschach obsessed with Hannah Arendt.
Yeah.
Different philosopher, but Ayn Rand's contemporary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that where Hannah, Wyoming comes from?
Oh.
Is that not a place in Wyoming?
I've not seen it, but I haven't been everywhere.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know.
So, yeah, and also that's another thing too where like I saw people saying I saw one article a long time ago that had said that this Rorschach was influenced by Hannah Arendt, but at the same time I didn't feel like the philosophies actually matched, and it was only towards the very end, I think it was middle end ish, when we read the letters between Laura and Will, and basically Will says that no, what am I? It's not those letters. It is who basically said somebody compares somebody else to Eichmann.
I know what you're talking about. But now I'm blanking on it too.
That's the Private Eye is talking to Will Myerson, but in his head, because obviously Will Myerson is dead. That's what it is. Right. So yeah, basically it's that's closer to the end. So the private eye is starting to basically believe that this whole, like, you know, big conspiracy that that one campaign was framing the other, the Redford campaign, to for this assassination plot to get ahead, and it is the private eye's projection of Will Myerson as Rorschach, basically saying that, or not as Rorschach, actually, he is just Will Myerson in that projection, but he's saying that he is reminded of Eichmann, who basically, you know, just wasn't paying attention to, you know, what was going on, and just kind of did his job and kept his head down, and felt like, you know, it was better off if, you know, if he didn't do it, then somebody else would, and it might have been worse for the Jews in the concentration camp. Because I don't think I've said that, but Eichmann was basically a part of the Nazi political party.
You said he was a train conductor? So.
Yeah. Which I feel like also, so I've read parts of Hannah Arendt's Eichmann in Jerusalem, and basically it's definitely a little simplified, and that's the only reference to her work that I've been able to find.
Eichmann?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it seems a little bit strange, where it's like, to me, Rorschach and Watchmen was so obviously, you know, right-wing Randian, you know, in this one it has a lot of Arendtian, like, kind of ideas, but it's not like as like obvious.
Oh, gotcha.
And it's a little bit more muddled in my mind.
So, and I want to bring back to the article in saying that, like, I don't know if it's only because I feel like King focused on a very specific point from Arendt, like, of saying, you know, instead of asking the question, is it wrong to, there it is it bad to kill Nazis without trial? The question is, if the original idea is, it's obviously bad to kill people without trials. And then the question that is kind of Arendtian, I guess, is it bad to kill Nazis without trial? And so, and then he was like, how does that change our perception of superheroes and conception of vigilantism? Which I assume is like, okay, he's looking at it from a very specific lens. Right.
Yeah, because, I guess that is another part of, you know, to make it clear. So Eichmann in Jerusalem is basically a book that is based upon, well, not based upon, it collects Hannah Arendt's coverage of the Eichmann trial in Jerusalem, and basically she kind of talks about, you know, she gives her own opinion. She was Jewish herself, and she basically says that, you know, so she gives her theory of what evil is, and also says that for the most evil people, that there should be no, you know, deliberation, essentially. I wish that I would have done a little bit more research before this episode to give a, you know, more matter-of-fact way, but yeah, so I think that that's probably where Tom King is coming from, you know. But
I mean, that to me makes sense, because especially at the end where it's like he's the detective is going down the rabbit hole of like, this is what's really happening, and it gets to the point where he's like, you know what you have to do, you have to kill him, because he is the most evil
Right.
He being Turley.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Which, I mean, see, the thing, though, is that what Hannah Arendt says is the most evil is the banality of evil, to let things just go without doing anything. And so, like, yes, on the one hand, the private eye who becomes Rorschach, he is doing what he feels is right, you know. But on the other hand, it is not ironically, the campaign manager and the person running for president, they are actually like engaged in, you know, doing something. I mean, granted, of course, so is like Hitler, you know, and so I'm sure that Hannah Arendt wouldn't argue that, you know, Eichmann was more evil than Hitler, but yeah, it's weird that, to me, to focus on that so much and then not have a super clear picture, I guess, you know, to really like hammer home that theme. Or, you know, have some sort of like outward explanation to be all like, this is what I meant, you know, like some sort of, I don't know, author's epilogue kind of thing where it's like,
oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm kind of like, I appreciate promoting Hannah Arendt's work, you know, even though I'm not necessarily specifically Arendtian, to be clear. I just think that it's interesting and, you know, not as many people know it as, for instance, Rand. But at the same time, it is a little bit muddled in my opinion, where it's like, okay, well, you know, not everything fits to me.
That's fair.
But yeah. Still interesting though, so you know, it is kind of a double-sided thing where it's like, I kind of like that, but I also kind of don't. You gotta do it right, I think.
Yeah, I will say, so something that I didn't like, and honestly something that you said kind of made me feel like I didn't necessarily have the whole picture, so I less dislike it, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But King talked about heavily in his interviews that he did not want to like make a Watchmen cover band, is his words. Which to him meant like redoing or doing a riff off of Allen and Gibbons.
Right.
And so, but so originally when he was pitched this idea, he wasn't going to do it because for that same reason. But then he saw the HBO TV show and he was like, I wanted to dislike it, but I watched it and I was like, man, this is really good. And what he was saying was like, it's not Watchmen. Like, this is a quote. It's not Watchmen, but it's using the vocabulary of Watchmen to highlight things going on in today and talking about race relations in America. And so what he was saying is that gave him the idea for this comic. And so that's why he just ultimately decided to do it.
Yeah. And
so to me, I just think about that and I'm like, I don't like that. Like, because like, but then he goes on to further say that what Watchmen did was like tell a story, like not an original story, but a story in an original way, like in a different way. And so to do what Watchmen did is essentially to do what Watchmen didn't do. So you want to tell a story in a different way.
Yeah.
And so to that, I'm like, okay, I get where you're coming from. I just think I just disagree with you. Like, in the sense that that is how I feel like it should have gone. Like that.
Okay. Yeah. I think I see what you're saying.
Like I agree. If I held that same viewpoint, then I agree with your then conclusion. Like if I agreed with the premise, I agree with the conclusion.
Right.
So to me, like, it seemed very much like taking the vocabulary and using it to talk about something else is like, to me, it's like I'm commandeering this IP and saying something totally different than that. And to me, I was like, no, I don't like that idea. Like, that seems very much like not what the heart of it is.
Right. No, I kind of, so yeah. I'm in a similar place actually, because like on the one hand, I do feel like, there are a couple of things that do make it feel a little bit like a Watchmen, cover band, to use the same, wordage. But also, at the same time, so I had the thought, I was like, well, maybe this would have been a little bit better if it wasn't, it just didn't have the layer of Watchmen on it, but then at the same time, it's like, okay, well, how would you even do that? I don't think you could, unless you just put another layer of fusification, basically, and we're all like, no, this is actually like basically change everything, like visual and name wise, but then still have it kind of be about Watchmen. But yeah, but at the same time, just because they're kind of stuck in that trap doesn't mean that, like, the idea itself, like, it doesn't feel like it has enough relationship, I guess, to the story, because it's like you said, in order to be like Watchmen, it had to be, to differentiate itself. But at the same time, the only thing that Watchmen maybe differentiated itself from was the original Charleston Comics characters that it based it on. But at the same time, Alan Moore was just going to use those characters for that story. They just were all like, hey, maybe we want to use those characters for something else later down the line. And these really just tarnish them into being like horrible, horrible people. So like, let's not do that. Let's change the names. So yeah, like, it is kind of like, I just feel like this could have been, a different story, I guess.
Like, to me, I think it's to its detriment, where if a story is like, you can take it out of its like context and place it into a different context and it'd be the same. So like a lot of this political intrigue stuff, like that could not have been connected to Watchmen and it still would have worked.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's like, it's to the detriment of the story.
Yeah, at the same time, though, it is like, so it's not connected to Watchmen, but then it's like, I'm less willing to accept, kind of like how Jake was saying earlier, basically the flip of the, like, we're led on this journey that, basically the Redford campaign paid for the assassination of the other candidate, and then it's like, oh, actually it was a frame job. Like, I don't know if I would accept that in another universe. And then also it's like, the details of like why they aren't winning, like, there's no way that, I'd be like, it'd feel silly in another book that Vietnam is a state,
Right, yeah.
But again, that's just the details, and so maybe it's like, that doesn't really matter. I don't know.
I mean, I feel like those details too, like, sure, there would be some things that would be different, right? Mm-hmm. It would be more like, instead of Vietnam, it would be more like large states, or states with big representation, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and it could still be an alternate universe from our own. Yeah. I don't know.
Oh, no.
No, you good. Well, yeah, what do you think, Jake?
I don't really know about all of that. I'll tell you, I didn't like that issue where it was all letters between those two.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't like it. Because I feel like all of what it was trying to tell us about the characters could either be interpreted or they had already told us, like, yeah, I know Myerson's lonely. And you know what? I could have guessed that the person whose dad killed her mom and then raised her as like a militia member probably didn't have a great life and might have tried to kill herself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But see, to me, when I read that comic, what I see is like, this is how that relationship got started. And it's like the dynamic of, oh, this person reached out to him, and she reached out to him based on a work that is less well known, and to him more at his heart. And so it's like, if you could almost see it, and I almost do see it this way, where she was conning him into being Rorschach. And so it's like, she's reaching out to him, and then he's becoming more and more friendly with her, like, oh my gosh, I see you as like myself or even my daughter, like that kind of thing. To the point where, hey, come over to my place, let's talk. And then she tells him that's how she got in.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely, I wouldn't say a con as much as it reads kind of more like a cult. Because like, yeah, I don't feel like Laura doesn't believe, what she's saying. Like, I feel like that's like the differentiation. A con man knows what reality is,
Mm-hmm.
but a cult leader, buys into his own story a little bit more. Even if there is like an element of, knowing what reality is, because it is about having like control over people. It's like you kind of have to buy into it a little bit to go that far, and so yeah, that's kind of what it felt like to me. But to get back onto the letters themselves, yeah, I did feel like in general there was some points where it was like, this is so many captions. Even Fair. Like not just in the letters, there was also, points where it was just the private eye, thinking to himself, not to mention when he was also talking to himself, but at least that was a little bit more interesting. It was just a lot of captions that went on, and sometimes, lots of panels of that with captions or double captions in each. So yeah,
I would definitely agree with that. And I think even if I did like what it was saying more while it was doing it, I think the gimmick, for lack of a better word, kind of outstays its welcome. It's like a whole issue doing that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the letters didn't bother me as much as you, Jake, but it is just, for me, part of that broader problem of just like, not having as many like character interactions, because at least the letters, to me, at least they are an interaction, but yeah.
Gotcha. So in addition to what we're saying, this is not this is a good thing disguised as a bad thing. So, when you get to the end of this collection, you start to realize that a lot of the earlier stuff really didn't matter. And so I was almost like, man, why did we have to know anything about her dad or anything about the coal mine that exploded? Like, why did we need all that information? But the comic explained that to us, and I accepted it. Because at the end, when the detective is talking to himself, but talking to Laura, he explains how you led me to find the notebook, which led me to sympathize with you, and ultimately, trying to win me on your side. And then what I realized is that, well, that's why we went through this journey of going through the coal mines and like all that. It's like, it's all kind of like we're being led in that very much that same way. And so to me, if I look at it like that, I'm like, okay, I can accept that.
Yeah. I don't know. You bring up a good point that I think that, well, yes, the private eye does eventually become Rorschach, essentially, among other people that have taken on the role. It is kind of weird to have a story called Rorschach where we follow somebody who is not Rorschach.
Sure.
And you are kind of right that things don't really matter. And essentially it is just to get us on the side of, the Will Myerson, Laura Cummings, and eventually the private eye. But I'm not sure that that's worth it, It is kind of like, okay, yeah, I did start to care about them, but then it is also like, yeah, I don't know. There is a part where it's like, it does kind of feel like you were robbed a little bit, especially like these people are already dead in the story on arrival. So it's kind of like,
right.
All right. Yeah, I can. They certainly were people that went through stuff, but I don't know. They're not there anymore. And really, you think about it, like we don't actually get that much characterization for the private eye.
True.
So yeah, we're basically just supposed to identify ourselves in him because he is also becoming sympathetic for the other characters, which we are as well, assumably.
Right.
But that is a lot of steps.
Yeah. That assumes a lot of buy-in from the audience.
Yeah. Yes. It assumes a lot of buy-in. Yeah. So I'm kind of like, I don't know. About all that. Yeah. So I see what, basically to say, I see what you're saying, Talon. But yeah, I can also see how that's could be just a bad thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what else I did not like. Yeah, I think that kind of is it, though, that like basically there was a lot that didn't matter, and it was kind of just like, what was this about? Actually, yeah, that's a good thing that, like, you were talking about in the Tom King interviews, is that this is supposed to be about like the political environment of what was this, like, essentially written in 2016, 2017.
Well, this came out in 2020.
Came out in 2020, so yeah, maybe 18 and 19 then, more like. Yeah, so this was, you know, before the protests for trying to think of the name, I'm just blanking right now. George Floyd, which was in 2020. But yeah, so is this like more in reaction to political divisiveness around, like, you know, Donald Trump and stuff of that nature? Because
I think so.
I just didn't really feel like that came through. Like, I mean, I did see a little bit of that where, like, at the end, there's the speech that's, like, you know, basically talking about the conservative revolution and how, you know, that is going to be, you know, making things how they used to be. And so it's very, like, much like, you know, like, Make America Great Again kind of thing. But,
I also saw it on another level where you where is it again? You're in Wyoming, like Hannah, Wyoming. And the detective is in this diner, and the woman is like, hey, if you see Turley, like, tell him, like, we're all behind him.
Right.
Kind of thing. And you basically get this characterization of Turley before you meet him that, oh, this is a really great guy. Redford is a really bad guy. And so we're behind Turley. And given the fact that Turley was in office 4 times, like, I don't know what happened there. But anyway.
Was he?
Yeah. Or not Turley. Redford.
Oh, yeah.
Redford, 4-time incumbent.
Right. Yeah.
Running for a 5th.
Because, yeah, in the Watchmen universe, they have either they never had or they got rid of the amendment that, you know, basically puts a term limit for the president of the United States.
Gotcha.
And I think it's Nixon who gets the first, you know, term limit, you know, past 4 years or past 8 years, I mean. Other than FDR, of course.
Yeah. And so you see this characterization of Turley as a great man. And then you get to know Turley, and that you honestly kind of gets thrown into question.
Right.
Because he's kind of a rough around the edges. And he says something like, don't tell the people I'm smoking or whatever. Like,
right.
It, like, we don't want to upset the image that my campaign team is trying to portray. Something like that.
Yeah.
And you realize, like, this guy maybe isn't like, his integrity isn't up to par.
Right.
And so, like, and then to me, the fact that, like, he's a conservative is like, it's a pretty, I'd say that's a pretty, like, direct-ish, like, reference.
Yeah. No, I can kind of see what you're saying. It's just that, like, to me, you know, I guess it's like, I can see that it's like, okay, we've got, you know, this conservative person who, you know, is like, you know, basically talks big talk about, like, you know, wanting the truth and, like, you know, to get rid of corruption. But then, you know, it is that he is corrupt himself, you know, that he doesn't say what is the truth.
Right.
But yeah, I feel like that's just, to me, like, just set dressing, you know. I don't see how it relates as much, you know, which, I mean, kind of gets into, like, I'm not sure what the point of this book was, I guess. it's like, yeah, it really feels a little bit, for all of the complicated plotting, pretty cut and dry of,
Yeah.
It is a guy is hired to, learn more about these assassins, and then it turns out that, it looks like what would be, not obvious, it's not a good thing or very common that in the United States a sitting president would, go to assassinate his competition for the seat of power, but like that at least makes some sense, and then it turns out again that was set up by the person that was supposed to be assassinated to, basically make his political opponent look bad, which, makes sense because the incumbent is, he's winning. Like, he has no reason, other than like the whole, what is it, the Nixon thing, which is, this is also kind of invoking in a way of like, basically planting listening devices in the Democratic National Convention so that, he could get more info on their strategy, their campaign strategy, which was illegal, even though he was winning, in the polls at the time. So, like, that's the only kind of thing where it's like, oh, well, this could make sense because there's kind of, a precedent, but except for at the same time, also, I think in that universe, Nixon never got Watergated because he
was never found out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's just kind of a little bit of a mess in that way. And, like, I'm not sure that the story says anything concrete about American division, about, like, why it exists, or, like, what to do about it, or, like...
Sure.
I don't know anything other than just, yeah, it exists. And politicians are kind of crummy, but, like, also it's, like... It also seems like a pretty, like... By not having any sort of... contact with the Redford administration, the Redford campaign, any of it, it kind of feels a little bit like, yeah, the Democratic Party is like all good, which, like, I feel like it's not controversial to say that, like, there's bad in both, so yeah, it's weird to me too that it's like, yeah, Redford was good all along.
Right.
Which, yeah, and I'm not sure that it says that entirely either, but it definitely doesn't do any work to say that it's bad.
Right.
So yeah, just to, after all of that, to kind of conclude, I'm not sure that this book is really saying a lot, and not what Tom King is claiming that it's saying, which is kind of worse. That, he had an idea in mind.
I will say, like, he described this as a very angry comic, like, which I'm not sure if I necessarily get that either, like, that message.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it does seem like the Private Eye is, like, he's getting more and more kind of fed up with, like, all of the, corruption and stuff like that, and, like, inaction. But, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it does not feel that angry either. Yeah, because it's all investigation of stuff, up until the very end. There's finally something that really happens. Yeah, I don't know.
Gotcha.
Yeah, what about you, Jake? Do you feel like you got a particular message from this book?
I mean, kind of. I would say, like, definitely like mainstreaming of conspiracy theory and like conspiracy thought. Some I would guess that agree generally that it's an angry book just because of like a lot of the tone and like how characters speak about like, because even Turley, it's like, he's talking about a conservative revolution. It's not just like it's not the rebirth of conservatism, or it's not the genesis of some new conservative. It's a revolution.
Good point.
So yeah. I would agree with that. But like a single message, no, I don't think so. I think it kind of depends on how you read it. It's like, do you think the private eye was right? Do you think that Redford actually did send assassins after Turley? Who knows? I don't.
Gotcha.
Yeah. It's interesting perspective for sure. And it is like, surprisingly, it's hard to like put myself back in the time of when this was written, even though it wasn't that long ago. I'm just like, so much has kind of happened politically that it's like, how do I relate to this? But yeah, I do like what you said, Jake, about like, I kind of forgot already about the people who believe in the squids coming, and it's like, they are starting militias in the United States, and that is definitely, something that happens in real life, conservative militias, basically, in small towns. Yeah, so I can kind of see that. I guess, yeah, the thing that makes it a little bit harder to parse then would be probably the more like sci-fi element of the squids. It's like, because it doesn't seem like, I'm not getting another side to this. Just like I said, we didn't get like Redford's side to it. We don't get to see people who don't believe or care about the squids. Just people who do, and then people that don't say anything about it. So yeah. But yeah. Is there anything else you guys didn't like? Think that that pretty much covers it for me. So I guess moving on to the artwork. There's a lot of really cool stuff, I think, in this. There was one panel in particular, and I'll see if I can find it, one page in particular. It was around the time where they were kind of reviewing Laura's history, with the Mountain Man. And basically it was like, it had an announcer of a show, or the circus show, the ringleader, whatever you want to call him. And he is like kind of he is he is juggling these beer bottles in front of a target, and it is Laura who is, meant to shoot the beer bottles in the air as he's juggling them one at a time. And on this page, it's really cool the way that the action goes, because you can kind of read it, just in your typical left to right, top down, but also the action actually happens in kind of this very like circular motion to go with the jugglers juggling. And I just felt like, and for reference, this is on page 84 of the copy that we're reading. And yeah, I just liked that, like, it really kind of has this cool, way to read it. And, we have like this section of panel where the bottles are that like connects to the section of panel where the juggler is, but they are two distinct panels to kind of convey the difference in time. And so, yeah, we have like, so the first shot goes off and it correlates with the blam of the gun, and then the of the bottle, and then the person juggling saying, "Oh God," and then blam, and then, he says another line of dialogue. So you're really almost reading, top down, left to right, and yeah, you can actually go all the way down the page, because there's also the reactions to people, and then the final bottle at the bottom. It's a very, it's a interestingly laid out page that's not the standard. And that is definitely like, talking about Watchmen and like doing things differently from Watchmen. That is a good example where they did have creative layout, but for the most part they stuck to very standard panel grids and, standard comic book storytelling language. Even just having the onomatopoeia on, coming outside of the panel and into the other panel is not standard for Watchmen. So yeah, I really liked that in particular. The coloring was also pretty good, but sometimes they used like, so there would be times where color signified what either, being in the past or the present, or it might show whose perspective we're seeing, if we're seeing Will's or Laura's, or it might show, perspective of the lawyer, the psychiatrist, and the handyman. But those colorings basically, they would use the same ones for different things. And so it wasn't kept kind of standard all the time. Or the coloring would just be normal present day coloring. And so, yeah, that was, I wouldn't say it's confusing. I generally knew what it was going for each time. But at the same time, it was distracting, I would say. I was like, well, wait, why are you doing it this way when it would make more sense? Yeah. But yeah, overall, I felt like the art was pretty good. There's a couple of spots where they really made their mark and wanted to do it, and really like having fun with the panel layouts. But yeah, and also again on the coloring, I feel like they were trying to, do more, calling back to Watchmen, with their colors in a lot of ways. Yeah. which I'm not sure that is for better or worse, you know, but I'm like, I don't know if I like that or not, you know.
Gotcha.
Yeah. What did you guys think of the art?
I mean, in general, it was good. Don't really have any like in-depth analysis of it, because honestly, I was more paying attention to the story. But so, as one YouTube creator would say, is if I have nothing to say about the art, it's good. So, but something I did notice is that there would be times where they'd have the speaker speaking off panel, focusing on the other character that's listening, or even when they were playing the tape at the end, right when the detective killed the Alan and Turley, you see just kind of like squiggly lines around the dialogue. And and it might just be like I just missed it at first, but it was confusing because I didn't understand that it wasn't the person in the panel that was speaking. And then particularly with the tape, that what first reading it, I thought that the tape was being played. But then something about it didn't make any sense. So I had to reread it, and I realized that it's the same speech bubble that is given to Rorschach. So I then took it to mean that it was Turley and Alan being attacked, or the detective speaking.
Right.
And so there were a couple moments like that where I was like, I don't know who's speaking. And so.
Yeah, no, definitely at that end part, I was a little confused too, but I was just kind of like, I think that if I just keep going, I'll understand. And then I did. I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. Because I definitely, like, you know, you can feel the tension, I think, in that scene where it's like, this is, you know, he knows the truth. He's playing along, but he's like, you know, at first he's barely playing along. He's like, you know, just kind of like very dismissive about everything, you know, and then finally he's like, you know, like, yes, you know, this is what I found, you know, this is what it is. But then, like, you know, he's like, you gotta lean in real close to the tape recorder because it's hard to hear. I'm like, oh no, no.
I gotcha.
But yeah, that being said, even though I kind of knew what was coming, like, I was like, because he also, like, you know, throughout that scene, you know, he has the tape recorder, and it feels like, you know, they say that, you know, they have to bring it in to like provide the evidence, even though the security person doesn't want to let him bring it in because that's one of the rules. And it does very much feel like he's sneaking it in, you know, still like this is under a guise. So, and then he starts recording at one point. And so I'm like, is he going to play back something for them before they die, you know, or?
Yeah, I think at first I thought, because I noticed that he started recording, I thought it was going to play that, like their conversation that they had up to that point, or something like Alan or Turley being like, yeah, we had this plan to set up Redford, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what I thought was an admission of guilt, you know, and then like basically be like, haha, I got you. And then so yeah, I don't know. That was a little hard to parse, but then became clear as he went on. Yeah, I can definitely see that.
And like those speech bubbles in the beginning, like what they would look like is just, you know, dialogue bubbles without like a little arrow pointing to either off screen or to the person. And so it was just like a text bubble.
Right. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. yeah, for the most part, I was pretty clear on those, but like every once in a while I've noticed them and I'd be like, wait, oh, okay, I see who's talking, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I get that. Jake, you got anything for the art?
I like the art. It's, pretty modern comic book art. I like the use of color, and I also like they sometimes showed panels of Pontius Pirate, and I like how they made it feel like it was a comic book in that universe.
Right.
Including like one of them was just like a ripoff of Amazing Fantasy 15, which I thought was pretty clever. But like it doesn't look like it's over the top and like it doesn't belong in the universe. Like I think they did a really good job of blending those. Yeah, I guess I kind of see what you guys talk about with like talking off screen or off panel, whatever you want to say. But I didn't find it to be that much of a problem.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So, moving on, I guess. We've read quite a bit of Tom King for the show or / personally. In fact, I feel like we've almost read most of his work. I think we're missing like what is it, the New God one, because I said Mr.
Miracle.
Oh wait, so okay, yeah, I said Mr. Miracle earlier, and for the UK Captain Marvel, that is actually Miracle Man.
Oh, okay.
Different characters. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But yes, Mr. Miracle. I've read that personally once, but we've not read it for the show. He also has Vision for Marvel.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And I feel like, there's a couple of like, he's written an issue of this, and we obviously have not read his whole Batman run, but that's long. And we've read some of it for the show, actually. So yeah, I feel like that's like maybe the last two Tom King things, major, like series. Oh yeah, Human Target also, and there's one other one, Strange Adventure. Those two, actually.
Okay.
But yeah, so how are you guys feeling about Tom King?
This is better than I thought it would be.
And
I feel like that's high praise, especially for like a Watchmen sequel.
Yeah, spin-off sequel is what I've been calling it, because it's like,
oh yeah,
definitely takes place later in the universe, but it's about a different character completely. I'm like, man, well, I guess maybe I should watch the Watchmen show before I say this, but I'm like, where is Dan and I forget what Silk Spectre's name is.
Oh, okay.
Because yeah, they're on the run, but kind of, that the other part of the epilogue of Watchmen is that they like, basically take on new hero personas. I want to know where they are. Anyway, though, yeah, go ahead. You were saying, Jake, I think.
No, it was pretty much finished. I mean,
Okay.
It's like better than I thought, but it's not saying much, but it's also about as much as you could say for Watchmen.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Would I read more? Is that the question?
Yeah. And your thoughts on Tom King, I guess.
Gotcha. So, he really messed up with the Batman and Catwoman wedding thing. So
yeah, it was pretty bad.
So, before reading this comic, I would have been like, but like if I'm like open to reading more of him, more of his stuff. And I would especially look forward to reading another like mystery-oriented comic. Because if he can apply this level of like engagement and detail, you know, into other mysteries, like I'd have been like, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. For me, I'd say that I've liked Tom King, you know. There are certain, you know, things about him that, like, you know, he always just puts in all of his writing. Cough cough, the CIA.
All right, is he the one that was?
Yeah. But yeah, I think that overall I can trust him to make a pretty decent comic book story. Decent to, you know, good to great, you know, given the right circumstances, basically. And perhaps, you know, I feel like his best work has been on limited series. I remember liking his Batman, but I didn't keep reading it. So maybe it is just a matter of he's not good at continuing past 6 to 12 issues. But yeah. I would read more. I don't want them to do any more with the Watchmen universe. I think I would have been fine with there only ever being Watchmen. It doesn't, like, you know, it does better with the idea that, like, you know, basically having your imagination fill in the rest, you know. And I feel like that's like part of the reason why they feel like they can't touch a lot of, like, you know, like I said, what happened to Dan and Lori's her name. And, you know, what happened, like, I guess Doomsday Clock does mention that Rorschach's journal gets out, but, like, you know, just like it's not actually about Rorschach's journal. It, like, you know, jumps ahead, you know. And so it's like they don't touch those things because the story is actually better if you just assume that those things are there, you know, and kind of make your own ideas about, you know, where things go. It's just not the kind of thing that is necessary to have a sequel. But yeah, like I said before, I felt like this was maybe the best way to do it, if they are going to do it, where, you know, and similar to the show, as, you know, the interview stated was, you know, kind of inspiration. It's kind of just taking a chunk of something that's happening in this universe in a different time period. So yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's all that we have for the show. Thank you, everybody, for listening. This has been the Comic Panel. I'm Cody.
I'm Talon.
And I'm Jacob.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Music, Spotify, or Podbean. You can support this podcast by sharing it with anyone you know and by rating and reviewing our podcast. You can also reach out to us with any thoughts you have on the things we talk about on Twitter at TheComicPanel1 and on Instagram and Facebook at TheComicPanel. We appreciate your feedback and look forward to sharing many more comic thoughts with you. Have a blessed day.